In the meantime, we have a very special guest. One of the hosts on the show literally calls him father, and the
he's
other
like a
host,
father to me.
he's
you know?
like a father. We're gonna bring on Coach Tony Patritto, head coach of the Adams Highlanders, state championship winner, bunch of other accolades, coaching Hall of Fame. The list goes on and on. Not to inflate your ego, Coach, but how are you doing tonight?
Hey, by the way, I didn't know you could swear on a podcast, so I learned something today.
You can swear on the podcast.
There's been a lot worse said on this podcast.
A lot of bad things said.
You should try watching an episode, Pops. You know what I mean?
I listen. I don't watch, so I'm good.
Well, you can hear the swear words too.
Yeah,
last time I checked.
So first things first, and this is kind of nice because I get to sort of ask Mark questions, along with you. How has having your son as a coach on the coaching staff gone the past couple of years? Has that been an adjustment, or with all the success you guys have seen, has that been kind of a nice way to get Mark integrated and he just gets in, you guys start rolling people?
That's a loaded question. To be perfectly honest, when you're a dad and you're coaching with your son, it's very much like being a dad, like you and TJ. There's great moments where it's smooth, everything's perfect, but there's not a consensus in terms of opinion. You may know that Mark's got some strong opinions sometimes, and we do clash occasionally on the sidelines. I think it's a good thing. It's healthy when it's controlled. Just like a father and son argue about all kinds of stuff relative to curfew or what we're going to eat for dinner. So for the most part, what I like the best about it is this quality time with him that most dads don't get to have. And more importantly, it's great for our kids. He makes our team better. He makes our players better. And that's what my job is about. So I can take a back burner in certain areas now because he does a better job in some areas than I do.
Do you have any things in specific that you feel like he's doing a great job at?
Yeah, I think getting the most out of every individual player, finite technique for receivers, most especially confidence for kids that haven't had confidence before is something Mark's really good at harvesting. That's what I see. The X and O stuff is the X and O stuff. I mean, football coaches are going to argue, and the last guy with the marker usually wins. But it's really the intangibles that Mark brings to all of our players and making them feel important and reaching their individual best. That's what we're all about.
That's awesome. Now, talking about the X's and O's, you've pretty much been a champion of the triple option basically your entire coaching career. Now, some coaches, I think, try to adapt their offense to the players that they get. And I would say that overall, you've ran a pretty stable ship about, nope, this is what we do. These are the plays that we run, and we're just going to kick ass with it. Yeah. As you've kind of gotten some pretty awesome talent over the years, guys come to mind like, Matt Sokol or Pretty Gordon recently, or some of the other players that you've coached. Like, how do you maximize their talents within your offense without bending too much about what you're used to doing?
Well, I mean, it goes back for me 35 years. It's like you have to know what you know and coach what you know well, and you have something you need to execute at a high level. However, you definitely have to tweak based on the skill set of the players you have. But you have to have something to hang your hat on. You can't just pick and choose occasionally and kind of dabble in something. And there's a fine line there. So I think the art of coaching has to do with twisting and tweaking your philosophy to match the talent of your players. Parker Pico comes to mind. Very special young man. And he did some things that really, to be honest with you, I've never really seen before on the football field relative to making plays as a runner at the quarterback position. And not since Tony and Eats have had anything like that. So we have modified the offense a great deal. We tried to break some really strong tendencies we had a couple years ago. We were reflective after the 2020 season. And, our coaches looked at me and said, listen, when we're in shotgun, we're throwing it. When we're not in shotgun, we're running it. Like, that's not hard to figure out or to defend. So I've been open-minded and listened. And we've done more to change some of those things. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but at the end of the day, if the second you stop learning, you become stupid. So it's my perspective. I'm still trying to learn, and we're trying to tweak the offense to give our kids the best chance at winning.
Yeah,
adapt or die.
It's a long podcast, so feel free to get as long-winded as you want in some of these answers.
It's not like there's a ton of NFL news we have to cover today.
Yeah, exactly. Slow NFL news week once again. Kind of a question that pops in my mind with that then is, you guys have seen a lot of success and, you've always been a winning organization, but the past 2 years do really stand out where, it was new even to me watching you guys just roll some really, really good teams. Do you feel like that has come from adapting the offense? Do you feel like it's a change in the coaching staff? Do you feel like you just have more buy-in from the kids? or is it a combination of all three? Like, is there any specific thing that you attribute to, Adams football really kicking ass and taking names the past couple of years?
Well, I think that at the end of the day in high school football, it comes down with chemistry and leadership from the kids. I think coaches get way too much credit and way too much blame. I've always said that. I'm going to give a lot of credit to your brother and the fall of 2021 football team in terms of they created a standard for themselves. They embraced our model of resilience and they grinded from day one. And, anecdotally speaking, our first game was against the defending state champion, West Bloomfield. And there wasn't a guy on our bus driving over there that didn't think we were going to win that game. And by the way, no one else in the world, other than the kids on the bus, thought we were going to win that game. So I have to give credit where credit's due, and that's the players. And they created a work ethic and a standard of performance and a lack of intimidation that I truly respect. And that carried through. And I think last year, same deal. Like, okay, you lost this guy, you lost that guy. The Greek went to Harvard. Like, you're playing this crazy schedule. Like, what are the odds of you repeating? Well, we won the Red again, and we beat West Bloomfield again, and teams we weren't supposed to beat. Just because I think our kids have a standard that they want to play to. And that has very little to do with X's and O's. Clearly, we can do what we can as coaches to put them in a position to be successful. But I truly believe an inherent chemistry and belief system in each other is more important than any call I ever make. So, I'm going to credit the last two senior classes and what they brought to the table and the ability of the juniors in those 2 years to follow and be good teammates, even though maybe they weren't the stars at that time. When you have that kind of thing going on and you can still have fun at practice, then you got a chance.
One thing that's hilarious from my perspective is never in a million years would I have expected that level of buy-in from Josh and his class, because I, had them over for sleepovers, every week or whatever. Josh was bringing them around. And, when they're hanging out, it's an entirely different ball game. And then as soon as they step on the football field, 100% complete change in attitude. Incredibly serious about football. And I heard that confidence all the time when they were over at her house too, which I think is awesome.
They knew how to turn the switch. Like they would mess around, pre-practice or, up in the locker room. They joke around. The second that they know they need to turn it on,
right,
they would.
Yeah.
I would say that's just as important. Coach McFarland, who I look up to a great deal, always talks about teams getting too high or too low, and it really can affect your play on the field. They had that confidence, but they also had that calm where they could call each other nicknames and rip each other worse than I ever could, where it kind of made everything okay. So when things were going south, we're down 14-0 and in several games that year, those dudes didn't blink an eye because they loved each other. They could joke with each other, but when it was time to grind, they grinded. So Mark's exactly right.
That's a great segue too, because I did actually want to mention Coach McFarland. He's been by your side for close to 2 decades now coaching. What is that dynamic? Over 2 decades. What has that dynamic been like? And, the relationship that you two have and, all the things that go with coaching for somebody that long.
Well, at the end of the day, it's like when you have a job and you're working with people that you truly love and respect, it sure makes your job easier. And for me, having Mark to lean on, I only asked for one thing. My only demand when I got hurt at Adams was that dude has to be on my staff and he has to be in the building, because I wasn't. And I knew that because of the man he was and what he brought to the table, both in terms of character and coaching, there was no exception to that. And they accepted those terms, and it worked out pretty well. And he's had complete autonomy over the defense since day one. Some head coaches, and I've heard anecdotally from some of my colleagues who, when things aren't going good or there's a big play, walk down there and they try to veto their coordinator. Well, you've seen at the NFL level, fists have been thrown. I've seen coaches throw punches at each other in NFL games over those kinds of things. I have complete trust in him. I have blind faith in what he's doing for our defense and for our kids. And I can focus on what I'm supposed to focus on the defensive side of the ball. And because he truly believes in doing things the right way, we mesh. And some of the things I've been saying publicly about some of the negatives of high school football, I've gotten directly from him. And his attitude about it has really motivated me. For example, people want to talk about the differences between private schools or open enroll schools and what some schools are doing. And Max, since day one, has always been, listen, we can't do anything about that. They're going to cheat. They're going to cheat. But what's more gratifying than beating someone who's not following the rules like we are? That's the greatest thing ever. And of all the things I've learned from him, that's one of the biggest things. So I love the dude. I feel so fortunate to be coaching with him, and our kids are lucky to have him.
That's awesome.
Do you see this? Do you see this golden hour he's catching, John?
Yeah,
And what's
yeah.
with that?
Right.
You just purposely went outside knowing the sun would hit you at the right time.
There
John?
you go. See?
Yeah, unreal. I got a question to ask him, and I mean I've asked him before, but I'll ask him. You have done this for so long. You played, you've coached, you've watched your kids play as a parent. You're still doing it. What drives you from? I mean, obviously when you started, it was just like pure passion, young, hungry. You were done playing, you missed playing, but you're still doing it. What drives you to coach? Why do you love this game that so many people have questions about, and people have kind of stopped playing it? It's too violent. It's too dangerous. Soccer's the new thing. Lacrosse, but you have stuck so strong with football from day one since you were playing it back in the day all the way till now. What is like the driving force of that passion that you passed on to so many others like me?
Well, and what you answered the question. At the end of the day, the ultimate relationship business is football. There's a uniqueness to it. I'm not going to discredit other sports. That's just really naive of me because I don't know other sports. I don't know other locker rooms. But for me, it's the journey that I get to share with these kids and the coaches. Like most grown men don't get to do that. Like I'm a 58-year-old child. Like I can be a kid. I can act like a goofball. And I don't mind when the kids call me on that. That's fine. John, your brother, was famous for it. But at the end of the day, it's the relationship I build. It's hard to walk away from. Like it's so unique. And, you know, when you hear senior speeches like we do at Adams, you know, in December, that is those words that I hear from those kids or a text message or an email or the fact that John wants me to be on this podcast. I don't have any money, but I tell you what, the greatest wealth I have in my life is the relationship I've had with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of football players. And in many instances, their parents, who are so important to what we're trying to accomplish. So it's not always perfect and not all the relationships are great. But I'll tell you that I feel really wealthy because I can run into someone that I haven't seen in 32 years that I coached, and there's a special connection. And most people don't have that in their careers and their jobs, and I'm lucky to have it.
I can personally attest to that as well, because before you were coaching me directly as an 8th grader or freshman, you were there building that relationship. And well after the fact, where I'm walking in the Kroger parking lot a year ago and I hear vocal, what the hell are you doing? And I turn around and see you in a crowd of people. And like, you have that infectious personality with.
When was the last time you went to Kroger, didn't see someone you knew?
Other than Mr. Patera, probably no. It's
this guy, you know, every time he goes there, he knows somebody.
I saw Gettle. Gettle there today. Listen, that's what it's all about. Like that is truly, it's a special thing. It really, really is. Teaching isn't a conduit to that, but there's something special about the thousands of hours we spend together, whether it's Veer Camp, whether it's doubles, whether it's sitting around the locker room just talking, where you build those connections where. Like there's a couple kind of friendships. There's friendships where you're constantly in touch with somebody and it's great. There's friendships where you just kind of drift apart. You never really talk to the person ever again. And then there's those special relationships where you see that person 20 years later and it's like you never didn't see him. You see those people and it's like, I can hug that guy. I love that guy. We don't have to be on Facebook and Instagram, all that other stuff, communicating to know that we still love each other. That's what football brings us. That's the special kind of relationship.
To build off of that, you know, there's different levels, like you said, to the relationships. One of them being the fact that it's high school ball that you're coaching. You've had opportunities to maybe climb up, coach college, or you've coached youth football, right, for a long time too, with me and Cole and Anthony and a lot of other younger guys. What is it about that high school and that youth age that makes you want? Is it still just the relationships, or I mean, has there ever been a thought of maybe leaving that to pursue something, you know, bigger for yourself, or is it just that high school levels, it's just like the purest form of football that there is, and you want to stay there?
Yeah, there's two answers to that question. First and foremost, I'm a husband and a dad first. Being a college or professional coach is not a great way to be a dad or a husband. You know, when I visited New Orleans and the Saints, they had these little cubbies with mattresses in them, and that's where the coaches slept. They didn't get to go home. College coaches on the road recruiting, and you know, for me, the opportunities to leave, that would mean leaving our house, not being able to tuck the kids in at night, not seeing mom every day. Like that's, for me, that's a massive price to pay. And on top of that, the second part of that answer is there's an absolute altruism to high school athletes. They're playing for the love of the game. For some of them, just to belong to something bigger than themselves. For some of them, to get chicks. I don't know, but there's something really special about high school football that I am really attracted to. And that pure ability to have team first is, I can't sacrifice that. I was talking to some coaches who've come in to recruit recently, and they're telling me stories about NIL kids from Texas and California, where players are telling coaches, I'm not taking these reps because I'm not going to risk getting hurt. This isn't high school football. The kids are shaking off the coach saying, you know what, I'm not going to get hurt, so I'm just going to do a couple reps, so 7v7, I'm out. I want no part of that. Being at a major university, coaching some of those players, having to recruit those kids, I don't think I could play that game where I could be something other than who I am and speaking the truth, where I would make them feel really great about coming to my university. I think I would be a horrifically poor recruiter. So those two things keep me where I'm at. How's that?
I disagree there, but yeah, I mean, I think you could recruit if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think you could as well, but I also completely understand the idea that there is a game that goes far beyond football and much more into the realm of politics when it comes to recruiting at a college level and all of that stuff. And how do you feel now that, that is becoming a conversation at an earlier and earlier age, right? I mean, kids as early as their junior year now are being offered beyond scholarships sums of money to go and play football, right? And that's originally, if we want to call it the purity of the game or whatever, wasn't really affected until you graduated high school and were off to college. Now, early and earlier, that's becoming a thought in kids' heads where, I might be getting offered some sum of money from X college halfway through my senior year. Do I want to risk losing that or something like that? Has that become a conversation the past few years since NIL became a thing?
It's like, it's come so far. I mean, I have to be honest. When this fall started, when these guys were opting out of bowl games, which was the first window into this, I was like the old man, get off my lawn guy. Like, there's no way I would not play with my boys in the game. There's as a college player, unless there was no physical way for me to be on the field, I'm playing. I don't care if I'm Joey Bosa at Ohio State or I'm Joe Blow at Alma College. If I have a chance to play one more down with my guys, I'm playing that down. However, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars at stake here. There's families changed by these decisions with these young men. So I've come a little bit away from that, and I'm kind of understanding it more. But at the end of the day, some of these kids have been really abused by the college system before NIL. Some kids have really been, because the house has all the money and they have all the cards. And these players are totally vulnerable to adults making decisions for them. So in that aspect, NIL isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, I think it's polluting the nature of our sport. I've talked to NFL players and they tell me what separates a good team from a great team is chemistry. I think NIL is going to be the ultimate bugaboo to chemistry, because you have mercenaries coming in and they're playing for themselves, not their team. And I just don't think you can beat great teams that way. I think there's going to be a lot of really good teams, a lot of really good talent. The best teams are going to be the teams with coaches that can maintain some sense of togetherness, that special thing in football that we have, that's going to allow them to really win titles.
And I'd even argue all the way up to the NFL level chemistry. Obviously, these guys are millionaires, but I think the teams that do end up separating.
You see the teams like John. We talked about this a few episodes ago when the Jalen Hurts contract happened. He took a team-friendly way of getting himself rich. He deserved, arguably, most people would say he deserved that kind of money. I thought maybe it was a little too much, but he did deserve a significant raise in his contract. But he took it in a way where, in terms of the cap, it allows the team to still build. Right. Patrick Mahomes did the same thing. Joe Burrow, I assume, is going to do the same thing. Tom Brady famously did it for. I mean, that's a big part of why the Patriots were able to continue that dynasty for so long, is because Tom Brady never became bigger than the team, no matter how big he got.
Aaron Rodgers is exceptionally good at keeping his friends employed as well. So,
well, he keeps them employed, but he sure as hell didn't take a pay cut.
Yeah, but John, what you say is important. Even in the late 90s, when I talked to NFL guys that I met, they said their greatest experience as a player is walking down that tunnel or out of that locker room with their boys in high school football. Nothing like it. It's a freaking unicorn in your life. Those same guys said they've been on NFL teams with great chemistry and NFL teams without great chemistry, and it matters in the win-loss column. I had a chance to visit the Saints, and I watched them practice in a spring OTA. And watching Drew Brees lead is like nothing I've ever seen on a football field in my whole life. Every pass he threw, first of all, was complete because he's ridiculously accurate. But he would run with the receiver into the end zone and run all the way back after every single rep. You don't think that gave him credibility in the locker room? Like, he changed the culture of a team that struggled for 50 years because of his leadership. So I don't think you can underplay leadership and chemistry in NFL either. I think you're 100% right, John.
And we had Coach Bonamigo on. He said he would leave. He'd think he'd be the last one in the building. Bono. He put in a long day's work, extra time. Coaches already went home to their families. Like you said, some of them sleep there. He's leaving, and of course, last car in the parking lot, Drew Brees, and then comes in the next morning, thinks he's getting there before everybody to get a head start. Drew Brees, car parked, workout already done, watching film. Who knows how long he'd already been there? And he said that was just every day.
Few every relationships day. Like
every day.
Brees and Peyton. I mean, truly, they ran such a stable ship from a chemistry perspective in New Orleans. So another question too, just on that note, right, is you've had the unique opportunity of coaching all three of your kids pretty much from the beginning of their athletic careers all the way through high school. What were kind of the lessons learned from that, and also kind of the unique rewards that come with being able to coach your own kids?
And that's a hard one because I can remember when Mark finished his senior year at the banquet, I had to apologize to him because there's no blueprint for coaches when it comes to coaching your kids. The tendency for some is to do everything to elevate their kid and make it all about their kid and themselves. And that's a mistake. Another mistake coaches make, like I made, is you do everything you can to not have that appearance. So you just grind on your kid all the time, and you're constantly holding them to a standard that's really not reasonable because you don't want the other teammates to think that that player is getting special treatment. So that apology happened. As I coached Cole and as I coached Anthony, I think I got a little better with it. But you mentioned Mr. McFarland earlier. At the end of the day, our meetings were simple. You guys coach my kids. You make decisions about whether they're on varsity as a sophomore, or who we throw the ball to, or who we're playing where, because I can't be impartial. And if I'm going to be impartial, I'm actually going to be impartial in the wrong direction. So, and I learned through that dynamic. I was blessed to have three really talented kids. And it's really funny, John, in our community, and we have 99% of the fans are amazing. They're so supportive of Adams, but there are still people to this day that were my friends that are no longer my friends that truly believe that Mark, Cole, and Anthony played only because they were my children. And I don't know whose eyes they're using to watch them play. Mark was really good. I don't mention All-State. The other two were All-State, not chosen by me. But that's just the reality of daddy ball and coaching football. And I've had tons of conversations with your dad and coaching. I coached youth football for 10 years since Mark was 7 years old. And that was even harder because the glasses are even thicker for those parents. And you can try to do everything right, and you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah, and I knew I was asking a question that could go a few different ways, right, with that, because, I know that, that had to be really rewarding in a lot of ways. And I also saw firsthand the challenges that kind of came with that I think were really unfair to both of you. Because, again, like, being a teammate with Mark, I mean, Mark was a quiet, confident leader for the rest of us to, rally around. And so the idea that, he would be in the successful positions that he was in just because of the fact that his dad was the head coach was a very silly notion. And it is unfortunate that those things happen.
But here's the reality. Here's the reality, though. In life, I don't care what business you're in, you have to make difficult choices sometimes. I would much rather have risked and dealt with those problems to have that time coaching my three boys than to take the easy route and send them to another school. I mean, Al Fracassa, one of my good friends, because he didn't want to deal with this. I mean, he's a legend. He's the winningest coach in the history of our state. Well, it was at one time until Harrington passed him. Sent his kids to a different school because he was not going to deal with that. And I talked to him about it many, many times. He goes, Tony, I had to do that. There's no way I could have brought my son to Brother Rice because it would have been a nightmare. So at the end of the day, I chose to make that risk, and I would never, ever second guess that choice. I think I made the right call.
In a weird way, too, John, it helped with, like, in hindsight, at the time it sucked, but there's that pressure, right? You're the head coach. He's got all this success. He, everybody knows who he is. Like I said, he goes to Kroger. Everyone knows who he is. And now it's like, okay, you got the same last name. You look like him. How are you going to play? Right. And so I was the first one to do that. And a lot of people thought that I didn't deserve to be, playing varsity as a sophomore or getting the ball thrown to me or anything like that. So I had to deal with that stuff, with that pressure. But I think what it forced me to do, and then Cole and Anthony following, is play to a standard that we probably never would have gotten to without that pressure. We sure as hell weren't going to make him look like a fool and put him in a hard spot and say, okay, well, you're still going to play us because we suck? Or are we going to go be great regardless and make it damn sure that no one in the crowd thinks that we shouldn't be on the field? That's what it came down to. It was like, okay, well, he's on the sidelines and it's going to be kind of embarrassing if we're not good or not playing. And let's not make that decision hard for, hey, it's 3rd and 15. Are we throwing the ball to Mark or are we going to go somewhere else? Like, let's not make that decision hard. Let's make sure every coach staff agrees, everyone in the crowd knows where it's going, and that he's going to catch it every damn time. Like, that was what I kind of put on myself, and I think Cole and Anthony did the same thing.
And that's a brilliant point that I think maybe even I didn't spend enough time considering. Is obviously, like, you want to prove those people wrong, and I think that's awesome. Also, I got like 2 or 3 questions left here because you guys keep opening up a lot of awesome segues, and obviously I know the history of Adams High School football pretty well, having played there. The Brother Rice rivalry, right? And I know that's a little bit more in the past now. But, during that time period, what was that like, between the relationships you had with the coaches and facing off against each other, as frequently as you guys did?
Yeah, that was, for our community, very special. Obviously, the first one was in the state final in 2003. And then there was the game in 2005, then 2007, then 2009. And the crowds were massive. Like the feel of the field, that's what high school football is supposed to be about. In many ways, I feel kind of guilty because I framed it good versus evil. It was kind of like, we're doing the right way. All of our kids are from an 8-mile radius and they got all these deuce from all over the place and no one thinks we can win and blah, blah, blah. And that's what coaches do. And in many ways, I kind of meant it. But I love those games. I had mad respect for Coach Fracassa. We have been friends for over 35 years. He's one of the guys that called me when I had COVID. Like, he's a very special person in terms of maintaining lifelong relationships. We talked about that earlier. But those games for our community and for our players were special. When we won the game in 2007, Josh Rennell scored on 29 jet at the end of the game to win it. Man, the crowd rushed the field. It's the first time that happened in my career at Adams. There had to be 5,000 people on the field. That was, for our kids, I could not have been more happy.
That's awesome. And then, on the note of having kids within an 8-mile radius, right? Yeah. You've had, not the largest rosters by any stretch of the imagination. You've had to work with who you have. How has kind of overcoming those challenges, and maybe you can turn this into kind of an X and O's questions, right? Why is the triple option a good offense to run when you don't know who you're going to get any given year? And there might be some gaps you got to fill talent-wise, right?
I will tell you, that's a wonderful question. The reason why I run triple is my first head coaching job at Bishop Foley. I had 21 guys on my varsity. We were in the Central Division of the Catholic League. So we're going to play De La Salle. We're going to play Brother Rice. We're going to play DePores. We're going to play all these schools. And we had 160-pound linemen. Like, if we line up and try to run an inside zone or counter tray or any of that stuff, we're not getting anywhere. So we made a decision as a staff, and consciously, I'm the one that kind of brought that home, is we're going to double at the point of attack, make people play disciplined football on defense and keep possession, because we can only line up for so many downs and stop these guys. And that was the birth of the triple for me philosophically. I mean, back then it was split back, double tight, like Southwest Conference, like old Texas, I am hip stuff from the 60s and 70s that we were doing. And, I give a lot of credit to Tony Neese, because he's kind of my football mentor. And over time, it has morphed into flex bone and bird and pistol or shotgun, and we're still running philosophically the same stuff. But that hasn't changed. West Bloomfield has 7 Division I players in their defense. From my perspective, they should never stop us. Not one possession. Punt is failure. Field goal is failure. And that's my approach. Whether we're running triple or we're doing some of the newer stuff, if we execute at a high level, they ain't going to stop us. So that was the birth of the triple, and that's why we've always done it. That's why I'm never going to completely leave it.
I totally get that. And then, just one question, kind of departing from high school football a little bit. The Detroit Lions have the most hype behind them that they have had in Mark and I's lifetime for sure. And it's probably rivals any, Barry Sanders era or whatever that you've lived through. What do you think is making that team, finally, maybe kind of overnight, if you actually look at the grand scheme of things, a much better ran team with a lot more chemistry than they were in years prior. Like, what do you attribute that to when you're dealing with, multimillionaire athletes?
Yeah,
and
I'm going to give a lot of credit to Dan. What your shirt says has a lot to do with it. People make fun of mottos like resilience or one more, or whatever we've chosen in any of our years. But it has to have meaning. I honestly believe there's been a change in the chemistry and the feel of their locker room that translates to how they play in games. Talent's talent in the NFL. At the end of the day, you got to have talent. The play of Jared Goff, no one saw coming, those kinds of things. And they brought in some seasoned veterans to lead. But at the end of the day, they have a different perspective on how they play. I'm going to be honest for a minute. My greatest fear is all this love they're getting. I think I would much rather the media, if I'm Dan Campbell, saying, well, they got grit, but they ain't as good as this team or they ain't good as that team. Because that puts you in a position where the chip on the shoulder cliche kind of bugs me a little bit. But I love being an underdog. Like, that is the greatest feeling in the world because you have this motivation to prove people wrong. I think in many ways, everyone wrote them off last year. And the last 8 or 9 games, we were happened to be in exactly right. Yeah, Mr. ACT or SAT. The Green Bay game, there was no motivation at all for that team to win that game. Zero. That they knew they were out of the playoffs. The game meant nothing. And those dudes went out there and balled. Like, for me, that signalment means Dan Campbell has that team with a common goal. Now, can he maintain that? That's the question. Like, you can talk roster moves all you want. That's, for me, what's going to dictate whether or not they win the division or not.
You could feel that shift that he's talking about. I went to, if you've been following the podcast for a while, we went to with my dad here, my brother, and a lot of and he talks about relationships to come full circle. A lot of his former players that he had from Foley hooked us up with an awesome weekend in Green Bay for that Sunday night game. And we were on the field. We had great seats. We witnessed kind of that culture that he just mentioned and the shift of basically killing Aaron Rodgers and what was Rodgers, Packers, playoff hopes. Basically, any hopes of him ever being a Green Bay Packer again were killed that day by just an energy and a will, even though the Lions knew their playoff odds were destroyed when Seattle won earlier in the day. So it was incredible to watch and see that, but you could feel that shift. And like, they just did not care, right? They were going in there and they were just gravediggers. They were going in there to destroy and end something. A team that was still playing for very much at the time were beat by a team that had nothing left. I mean, their season was over whether they won or lost.
And never understand the power of passion in football. You just cannot, because there's just so many moving parts, and the strength has to come with one loud voice. So when you have passion on your sideline, and I could feel it too. When you see Dan Campbell talk, people think it's a shtick. Like, first of all, he's physically terrifying to meet. Like, I met him in New Orleans. He is a massive dude. His shoulders are about this wide. Like,
his trap muscles are like mountains that go up to his neck.
Like, oh my gosh, he's Ben Piersmark if you tape me to him. Like, he's just this huge dude. But he's got this aura, this thing about him that's so incredibly sincere. People that don't know him, that watch him on TV, they think this is this shtick he's putting on. That's who he is. And players see through shtick. They see through stuff that's not real at all levels of football, by the way. And I think he's a for real dude. I don't want to give him too much credit yet until they do something more. He's going to prove who he is if they can show up, go to Kansas City and steal that first game, and then have momentum. That's what's going to define him, not the fact that they came back last year. Can you be perpetual in your passion with your locker room?
Now, what were your thoughts, though, on his game management, especially early last season, which pretty much cost us the playoffs?
Okay.
If we really
you put me in that situation because as a head coach, I don't like criticizing publicly other coaches because I've made so many mistakes in my career. Like,
yeah, but you're not paid a bajillion dollars to.
It's not the point. It doesn't matter.
Sole thing.
Listen, to the players on our sideline, a loss to a team like Clarkson, that was my fault, is just as important as the Lions not making the playoffs. From my perspective, I treat it with equal pressure. It's the same thing. So what I love about him is I think he actually took a step back, heard some of the noise about the mistakes he made, and worked to get better. No coach is infallible. no coach isn't going to not make mistakes. We're going to do things that sometimes are guttural. I think that's the nature of our sport. And when you stop doing that, if you don't have the confidence to do it, get out. You have to believe in what you're doing. But I think he's going to improve in that, and he needs to listen to people about end of game management, timeouts, that kind of stuff. He needs to listen to people with more experience than him as opposed to making those calls himself, because that's what I've learned to do.
I mean, some of them are nuts. Like some of them are just insane.
But again, it's a process. So that's over. Let's talk about 2023 for the Lions and whatever.
And I just quickly want to jump in and say it is hilarious because his personality is so many cliches that you almost don't think it's real. And then you realize he is 100% legit. He is like listens to Metallica, drinks a pot of coffee, wants to run through a wall. Football is everything every single day kind of guy. And it is awesome because I do think it's infectious.
100%. Like, coaches have to be who they are. I mean, you, John, you have an inside window to all of this, right? Like some coaches, they sit in their office, the doors closed. You don't see them until practice starts. When practice ends, they're gone, or they're in their office and their assistants handle all this stuff. Some coaches are more open to suggestion from players and other coaches. I mean, everybody, but you got to be true to yourself. I've seen coaches try to be like someone else they want to emulate. It doesn't work. I've actually done experience with coaches at camps where I'll say something that's totally doesn't make any sense to see if someone will repeat it, just to see if they're just trying to and I've done it upwards like a psychology experiment. I'm not proud of it, but veer camp after a while, it's like, okay, we got to do something. I'm getting bored. So I've actually done that several times and it's worked. It's like, that guy's a faker because he's just repeating what I said, not having any idea what it means. It doesn't even apply to the drill. So yeah, it's all about sincerity, even for NFL athletes. And I think Dan Campbell's sincere.
Absolutely. Mark, I do want to give you an opportunity if you have any other questions before we wrap up here. I know I've kind of steered this interview. Hopefully I've done a decent job in both of your eyes. So
no, you're natural. You're natural at it, John. I just want to have a couple fun questions with the big guy. Not even just fun, but do you have any negative and positive bold predictions going into college football or NFL?
Okay.
Any team that you think is getting way too much love that's going to be shitty? Any team you think that's getting no love that's going to be great? Any players that maybe that are getting slept on or are getting overhyped? I know you have opinions. So.
I do have opinions. I think the Cowboys are the most overrated team in football always.
There we go.
Drives me nuts. And I just don't understand they're not America's team, and they have not been since Roger Staubach left. So I don't understand that at all. I kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars coming out of nowhere. I know it's not an edge pick, but I think between quarterback play and some of the acquisitions they've made and their passion to play through the end of the season, I think they're going to be kind of terrifying to play. It's like I don't necessarily know it's going to work for sure in Buffalo. I think Buffalo has probably one of the best rosters and one of the toughest quarterbacks I've ever seen. But there's something about them that not sure it's going to happen. Just
Madden curse, maybe perhaps.
I'm not sure, but I think at the end of the day, until someone beats Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey, they got to be the favorite. Like what those guys do in key moments in games is kind of indescribable. I know that's not cutting edge either. Let's talk about college for a minute. So if you look at Georgia and Alabama, what they've done is special. I would say this, what they're doing in Ann Arbor is unprecedented in terms of how they're recruiting against those schools right now. Defies logic. And I remember when Coach Harbaugh came to Vincent's house for his visit, he told me in that moment he had just sat at his desk and wrote down 10 things he had to fix that he was not doing right. And since that moment, Michigan has gotten a lot better. If these guys all stay 3 years from now, 4 years from now, Michigan's going to win a national championship. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but what they're doing, continue this.
If there was ever a time, it might be this year. Yeah, when you look at
they have
Georgia lost a lot.
Yeah. Quarterback play is huge, right?
Running backs, two of them, two of the top three in the country. You could argue.
I worry about them
maybe the best two.
I worry about them at the receiver position right now. I don't think they're as strong as they might need to be. If people load the box, they're going to have guys that can separate. But that's kind of finite football talk. You're the expert on that. But listen, I don't. I would also say, and you guys, Mark, you know this more than anything. I think Michigan State might win 4 games. I think what they're doing in East Lansing is a travesty to college football, and how they recruit and how they run their business since Coach Tucker's been there. I'll say, because listen, I don't care if he sees it or not. it ain't right. And they're going to pay a massive price with karma and a massive price with recruiting because of how he does business.
We've said in recent episodes, there's never been a worse time or a worse situation for Michigan State right now than the fact that they are. I mean, it used to be every year was okay, Michigan State and Michigan is a rivalry, and then there's still Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. Right now, it's like Michigan beating Ohio State makes Michigan State so damn irrelevant, it's not even funny because the game is actually the game. And Michigan State is an afterthought for people in Ann Arbor. I mean, and that's how it should be if you're a Michigan fan. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how they think it should be. Little brother, right? And they should never, ever beat us. We're more worried about the team in Ohio, right, than we are about this team in East Lansing.
But here's what's different.
It's never felt more like that.
Yeah, but here's what's different. In the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, and even to the mid to Coach D'Antonio left, even when Michigan State wasn't good, they rose up for that game and gave Michigan hell. I mean, Michigan fans have to respect that. Like, I just think that's a fact. Yeah. I don't know necessarily that Coach Tucker has the chemistry in his locker room to do that anymore.
He did beat them in his first 2 appearances.
No question. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's like, but I think in many ways he's traded that blue collar grind, we're going to come up mentality for the flashy toy, and the flashy toy ain't going to get it done when you're not as talented.
It went downhill big time, I would say, after Kenneth Walker leaves, right? And then the fight in the tunnel.
That fight was something, man.
Not only did they get their ass beat on the field, right? They had that happen after the game. Terrible look. How he handled it was not great. Mel Tucker himself. How it was just not a good situation. And then it's leaked all the way into Michigan continuing to be better, beating Ohio again, going to the college football playoff, and having the number 1 recruiting class in the country now. It's like everything is pointing towards Michigan runs the state and might run the country here pretty soon, like you hinted at. And Michigan State is just left behind. It's hard for them to, without absolutely great coaching and stealing some underrated guys in recruiting and molding them into great players, to even come close to beating Michigan. And it's like they're the afterthought. It's never been worse right now for Michigan State, I think. And seeing Michigan get as good as they have and the consistency with Harbaugh, it's got to be tough to be a Sparty fan right now because there's no light right now. You can't see a light.
Honestly, though, Michigan fans our age, Mark, haven't really gotten that privilege, right?
No,
I grew up Exactly. I grew up listening to my dad being like, oh, Michigan was so good and unbeatable and whatever in the late 90s. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I would like to personally experience that sometime soon,
I don't think they lose a game this year.
I mean, they look really good.
Ohio comes to the big house to cap everything off. Their regular season games are usually pretty just like, I mean, they should win most of those games by 50 plus. And then, I mean, the Big Ten, aside from Penn State, who I think is coming to Michigan this year again, I believe.
No, I think it's a whiteout game in Cal State.
It might be. Yeah, but I mean,
that's a tough game. But besides that game, besides that game, I don't know. I mean, I think they beat Ohio at home.
Listen, Mark, if you saw Ohio State play against Georgia last year in the semifinal, I would be careful before you make that an easy win. Like,
did you watch them play Michigan
it's not
few
the
weeks
point.
prior?
The point is they had Georgia beat, man. Like,
no more Stroud, no more, Jackson Smith's gone. I know he didn't play.
College football. You're never gonna hear me say that. First of all, and I'll say this too. Like, Michigan could lose to Michigan State next year as well. Like, that's what's special about college football. Not saying it's gonna happen, but it could. Like, it's you got to earn your stripes, man. No one's gonna hand you anything.
Yeah, I mean, there were bad Michigan teams that really gave it to Ohio State for a few games too. So, you're completely right about that.
Appalachian State.
Right. Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark.
Yeah.
Coach, this has been an honor. Honestly, it's been really awesome. I haven't even heard you speak really since you got inducted to the Hall of Fame, and I do always miss just some Tony P speeches as well. They're always good and easy to grab people's attention with. So we really appreciate you coming on. Any last things that you want to mention before you sign off here?
No, listen, you guys are doing an amazing job. I'm so proud of what the synergy that the two of you have. It's pretty cool. Your message is cool. Your guest list, I'm probably the worst guest you've ever had. So that's, I'm not Khalil. I'm not playing in the league. But I'm an honor. It's an honor for me to be here. And Tej and I couldn't be more proud of our sons than we are of you two. And I'm glad to call him a good friend as well. So thank you and congratulations on all you've accomplished.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thanks,
Appreciate
Coach.
having me on. We'll see if you need any help turning off your laptop.
Leave him alone, Mark.
I had to get him all set up for those before we went on air.
Go there,
He's out there. He's out there. I mean, he is kind of like to technology as like Aaron Rodgers is with like the Chicago Bears. Like technology just kind of owns him. You know what I mean? It's not a good thing for him.
All right, we had a good thing going this 45 minutes, Mark, but I'm getting petty now. I got it.
I had to throw something in there.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thank you. All right, see you guys.
What I am honestly impressed about is the fact that the Wi-Fi held up with two of you streaming at once.
Oh, it's amazing. With him sitting out on the deck too, I wasn't sure of what was going to happen there.
I don't want to jinx it. That was maybe one of the best Wi-Fi situations we had for an interview in like recent memory. So
maybe it works better when there's two guests in the same house using the same internet in one episode.